Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrea Jenkins Wallace, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vice President of Artistic Affairs at Anderson Ranch. On behalf of the trustees, the National Council members, and my colleagues across campus, it's my honor to welcome you here today. At Anderson Ranch, our mission is to foster transformative experiences, and that's exactly what happens here every single day. Step into any of the studios, and you'll find incredible artwork being created. And it's not just about the art, it's about the people and a remarkable mix of artists of all ages, backgrounds, styles, and experience. We're so excited to host this conversation today, and deeply grateful to Katie Kiernan and 212 Gallery, who represent Shepard, Fairey, and Aspen, for making this conversation possible. And this mural project that you'll hear more about in a few minutes was made possible through the generosity of 212 Gallery and several local families, so thank you. Following the mural unveiling, 212 Gallery will host an exhibition openings at Studio Como on July 25th and the Snow Lodge on July 26th with Shepard Fairey, and he'll also be part of Intersect Aspen Art and Design Fair. Shepard Fairey is an acclaimed artist whose work has significantly impacted how we view art and the urban landscapes. He started, starting with his iconic Andre the Giant, has a, I have to put my glasses on, sorry. This is like, starting with his iconic work, Andre the Giant Has a Posse sticker in 1989, which evolved into Obey Giant campaign. He's built a nearly 35-year career. His notable works include the 2008 Hope Portrait of Barack Obama, displayed in the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, and the globally recognized We the People series from the 2017 Women Marches. His art is featured in numerous prestigious collections worldwide, and he's currently working on a second mural project with the city of Aspen. He'll be in conversation today with our very own Peter Wanders, President and CEO of Anderson Ranch. Peter has had a 35-year leadership career at the intersection of arts, ideas, and programming. Over his career in bookstores, art galleries, and nonprofits, he has organized a range of speaker events, from small talks to seminars and to large festivals. Please welcome Shepard, Fairey, and Peter Wanders.
Wow. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. Shepard, we're so happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Great to have you get a chance to walk around campus and get up here out of the humidity. I got to say, I got to organize all these talks. I rarely get to interview someone that I think is just so much cooler than I ever was. We can continue that theme through the talk today. But thrilled to have you here. Thrilled to see what you're doing with Katie. You got a chance to walk through the studios a little bit. But I'll tell you, the whole time I keep thinking about that Hope poster. So I thought we could make a little pledge that we don't talk about the Hope poster until Q&A.
Sounds good.
All right, so that'll kind of keep us into diving into too much of what's on the front page and politics and news, because I'd like to get there really through what you saw happening in the studios, which is your practice and your I keep coming in and out, it's throwing me. Through your practice and your process and your philosophy and approach. So what I'd like to do is start at the beginning, I guess. You grew up in North Carolina. I think we can throw some pictures up there.
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
I always want to meet somebody from South Dakota and keep saying, yeah, so how was North Dakota?
How was North Dakota? Oh, thank you. So tell us a little bit about growing up. It was the 80s and the 90s. You grew up kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
Get me through a little bit of those 80s and 90s. Like, what was it like? What did you care about as a teenager? Let's kind of begin there.
Sure. You know, Charleston, where I grew up, it's a really beautiful place. It's steeped in tradition because it's a peninsula that was a thriving port before the U.S. was even the U.S., when it was just the colonies. So there's a lot of gorgeous architecture. But as a kid, I didn't really understand how unique that was. And even though I couldn't articulate it, the kind of conservatism, the old plantation money mentality, the country club mentality, the social hierarchy there, a lot of it felt a little bit uncomfortable to me, but I didn't understand why. I loved to draw from when I was little. I was also totally hyperactive and was really into sports and mischief, a lot of throwing water balloons at cars and stuff like that. But I luckily found an outlet for my love of drawing and painting that was something I considered cool. Right before I turned 14, I borrowed a friend's skateboard, and I really fell in love with that. And then getting into skateboarding and the culture, that led to punk rock, that led to graffiti. So this whole world opened for me that was a do-it-yourself, rebellious, creative outlet that was kind of the antidote to everything that I felt was oppressive about Charleston. And my parents hated it, and I loved it.
You love it.
And it gave me, a lot of fuel, because drawing and painting were not cool at the school I went to. It was embarrassing. I actually snuck off to the art room during lunch, and people said, "Oh, you disappeared. Where'd you go?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was in the woods, drinking and smoking cigarettes." But not true at all.
I was in the woods drinking and smoking cigarettes.
But anyway, but I was really into art. But then once I got into skateboarding, I could make homemade T-shirts, zines, stickers. So it was the first time that art and something I was excited about culturally sort of came together harmoniously.
And is that the images that your studio shared? Is that some of the early work? You look
Yeah,
like
I mean,
16,
some like this figure drawing piece was from I think maybe when I was a junior or senior in high school, and that image of the skateboarder kid being arrested, that was from my freshman year of college. That's my senior year picture with me standing in front of a drawing with all the stuff in the background. I went to an art boarding school in Idlewild, California, above Palm Springs in the mountains. That was a campus very, very similar to here at Anderson Ranch. So it was like, very visceral walking in here and feeling like I was in a place similar to a place that made a huge difference in my life, where I was just living art all day, every day. And then there's some skateboard stuff from South Carolina and from Idlewild. You can see all the trees in the background in Idlewild, but they did have a few little spots of pavement here and there. But yeah, you can see in most of this stuff that I had a love of the graphic nature of a lot of stuff coming from punk rock and skateboarding, but I also was doing these traditional drawings, and it took a while for my love of art in general to find, the sweet spot where I could blend graphic things with more painterly things or more illustrative things, but the process was set in motion even when I was a senior in high school and started to really coalesce more in college.
Before we jump over to RISD real quick, I just set a little cultural moment there. How about like 3 songs in high school that really, really impacted you, really cared about?
All right. So, yeah, I knew this was coming, so I had a second to think about it. God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols, very angry, rebellious song, but it went to #1 in the UK, but they refused to list it, so they just left the #1 slot blank because it was disrespectful. And I just loved the coup of that, and I loved the music. Our daughter is named Vivian after Vivian Westwood, who did all the fashion for the Sex Pistols. I saw the Sex Pistols were a band that was really important to me because their art by Jamie Reed was really excellent. The music was great. The lyrics were great. The fashion was great. Malcolm McLaren as a media manipulator It was like its own cultural ecosystem that was like the first spore of the thing that took hold, and that how much of a difference that made culturally, that blew my mind. Bob Marley, Get Up, Stand Up. Loved that Bob Marley, sounds, the sounds are friendly. Reggae is very approachable and likable for almost anybody, but a lot of the lyrics are pretty powerful in terms of shaking things up. And then, the third one, I'd probably say the Dead Kennedys song "Bleed for Me" was a critique of Ronald Reagan's foreign policy and attitudes in general, and I hadn't really considered that the U.S. might not always be doing exactly the right thing.
Surprise.
So, these were important songs for me. They really got my adrenaline going, and they made me think.
When did hip hop hit the scene for you? When did you recognize
So,
it? When did it start impacting?
I loved the Beastie Boys, but that was more like, when I was a junior in high school. So the things I just mentioned were things that were like 8th grade, 9th grade. Public Enemy, the Beastie Boys, all the late 80s hip hop, Slick Rick, NWA. That stuff was very revolutionary to me too, because it was a do-it-yourself culture from a different perspective. The thing about punk rock was that it didn't require virtuosity. It just required passion and creativity, and there was a low barrier to entry. The same thing with hip hop. These aren't traditionally trained musicians. They figured out how to use samples from existing records, but in a way that was incredibly creative, and built something new that didn't sound anything really like the records they sampled, had a very different character. So I was like, yeah, this is the new punk rock. This has the same spirit of punk rock. So yes, that was also important. And hip hop was associated with graffiti, so that made me lean into that as well.
So your parents wanted you to get serious about art. They sent you to Idlewild, spent some time there. That got you into RISD. Get to RISD, and it seems like you found your stride really quickly with the Obey campaign and other things. How did that happen? Did you feel like you were there and you were rocking it? Did you feel like you were trying to find your spot? Like, what was RISD like for you?
RISD was really intimidating because there were so many talented people. First of all, I couldn't even believe I got in the first place. I mean, I've always had low self-esteem, so I just was like, no, I'm never going to get in. And then I got in, and I was like, oh shit, now I have to go to this school with all these talented people. But I do thrive feeding off of the energy of creative people and all the varied perspectives. There were so many talented people. I had access to really great facilities, and probably the learning about so many different artistic points of view very quickly was extremely valuable to me. And then a lot of being able to explore a lot of different techniques. I had done screen printing in high school to make homemade T-shirts because that was obligatory in punk rock and skateboarding. But to get into a little bit more technical screen printing, I had to be at RISD and around those processes and those facilities and getting to see what people were doing. But I took to that very quickly and learned it very quickly. And I realized that I loved to draw, I loved to paint, I loved photography, I loved graphic design, I loved collage with appropriated materials like what Jamie Reed had done for the Sex Pistols or what Winston Smith did for the Dead Kennedys. But I didn't want to do just one of any of those things. I wanted to blend those things. And screen printing, the way it synthesizes things into a cohesive aesthetic, it was the perfect medium for me to be able to experiment with. This has got this found art piece here with my own photography, with a drawn element, and that all could come together. And so you're right that I hit my stride once I discovered that, because I just spent so many hours in the studio experimenting. It was, I got a job. My parents didn't have enough money to pay for school and let me live a cushy life there, so I had to make a lot of my own money for just life expenses. So they had a school job program, and I got the job monitoring the screen print studio several days a week, including Friday and Saturday night when no one else was there. So it was like I had the entire studio to myself, working on my own projects, and then just cleaning up after myself since no one else was there, and then getting paid. So that was
I like
great.
the way you found a way to get paid to do what you love. The Obey campaign kind of launched recognition, classmate, like it was kind of a big boom, or like immediate success. And some of the images have been coming through. We're just going to rotate the slides so you guys will see different things. But was that a surprise to you? Did you have do you have a strategic business plan? I mean, it rolled out like this thing. Or was it like,
I love how
did this happen?
I love how it looks in hindsight. I just failed my way to success. But I mean, it was, so when I was at RISD and being told by a lot of professors, what you're doing here is, that's already been done better by Rauschenberg or Chuck Close or whoever. So abandon that because you'll never be able to do it as well as they do it. It was very daunting. I think the point of what they were saying was very legitimate, but it can be paralyzing. So having my street art project with the Andre the Giant stickers that evolved into the Obey campaign, that just started as an inside joke with some friends, but then putting things around, and the local free newspaper put a picture of my sticker and said, anyone that can tell us what the Andre the Giant sticker campaign is about wins free tickets to the living room show of their choice. That was like the venue where the Ramones and Suicidal Tendencies and Jane's Addiction played. And I was like, damn, I want those tickets, but I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. So, but I started to see that public space is usually, it's a one-way conversation. Businesses and government put things there for you to absorb as, a citizen, and you don't get to have a voice back. And I was like, oh, I like the idea of disrupting that a little bit. I'm mischievous. And what I realized is that other people were intrigued by that, and then some people were really pissed off about it. And I saw the sticker as a Rorschach test, but I became really interested in the psychology. I discovered Heidegger's theory of phenomenology. I was thinking back to Jamie Reed and Malcolm McLaren loving the Society of the Spectacle and some of Guy Debord's social theories. And all of this started to take this silly sticker campaign in a direction that could have something a little bit more meaningful. And so I wrote a manifesto for a class that initially started off as a 6-page paper that I condensed to a 1-pager, because if I was going to mail it out to people, it needed to be something that I could do for 5 cents and not 30 cents. So that was way too expensive. And also people have short attention spans, so make it digestible. But this just became a fun thing that I had a dialogue with the public. And I guess if you're paying attention, you can build things through dialogue. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
I can't resist asking, though, in the responses you got, what was the best answer you got to Andre the Giant has a posse? What was the explanation?
Oh,
or not what was the explanation? What was the best answer
there was a real range of responses, which was so fascinating. It's just a black and white crude sticker of a wrestler, but I remember seeing somebody wrote in ballpoint in the negative space of the sticker, Nazi shit. And I'm like, okay, I guess this person's worried about Nazis, and they're seeing them wherever wherever it's mysterious. I mean, there are Nazis out there, but it wasn't there in that sticker. And I overheard a conversation which made me think about just how horrible most guys are. It was a couple in the grocery store, and the guy goes like, "Hey, you've seen that Andre the Giant sticker?" And she's like, "Yeah, I think it's a skateboard company." And he goes, "No, I think it's a band." And she goes, "No, I'm pretty sure it's a skateboard company." He was like, "No, it's definitely a band. I've seen their flyers around." And like, he had to be right. And it was, neither one of them knew. But I was like, yeah, this is like people talking about this. And I'm sort of chuckling to myself, with my, jar of pickles in line behind them or whatever. And I just thought, okay, the more I put this thing out there, the more people are going to say, "What is it?" And you create a conversation. And then what I hoped was that the context of it, like, well, why is this there? That would lead to, well, why is that there? Why is any of this stuff going on? And I started, that's how it evolved from just the Andre sticker to the Obey campaign, which was a little bit more purposefully Orwellian and propagandistic, getting people to question that when the idea was that something that was packaged in the aesthetics of propaganda but was benevolent, people would definitely get maybe riled up about that and ask questions. But then there are other things that are propaganda that are packaged in Americana. It's and they maybe aren't asking the questions about that. So, could we have a bigger conversation about scratching beneath the surface?
Let's explore a little bit some of the imagery, and partially I'm going to come back to it, talking with Liz Farrell, who also is in the print program at RISD, and looking at some of your works. I guess there's a big archive in the print program of Russian propaganda posters. And we wondered if that sort of influenced your work, if you saw that earlier. I know that later there was a show that combined some of your work and some of those things, but was that imagery? And then I guess that starts to coming to some of the iconic things that you're like, well, is that about Nazis? Is that a secret society? What is the message there? Talk a little bit about how that imagery worked and how you saw it impacting your audience.
Sure. Well, there were a few things that I noticed were, in my opinion, very visually potent, effective, that were also produced with a limited color palette which suited my budget. I was very poor. And I'd also figured out how to rig the machines at Kinko's with a paperclip for free copies. For younger people, Kinko's was the most pervasive photocopy center in the nation for years, and their slogan was "Kinko's your copy center," and I took that very literally. I made it mine. But the copiers had this one copier that they had in most of the Kinko's had a red toner cartridge and a black toner cartridge. So I was thinking to myself, if I want to make posters to put up on the street, if I can make them work in red and black, I can come here late at night, rig the machines while the guy's sleeping in the back, and get free posters. And then I can also screen print, just red and black posters too at my studio. So Barbara Kruger's artwork, you all know Barbara Kruger, Your Body's a Battleground. She's lots of great iconic images. I shop, therefore I am. It's all text and image driven with Futura, extra bold, oblique, and knocked out in white, knocked out of a red bar. That was her signature look, and I loved her work, and my Obey icon with the red bar is a total homage to her, but not just to her. She was so popular, her aesthetic in the late 80s to mid 90s, that almost anyone that wanted to be taken seriously doing like activist art was emulating her style. So I knew that it would immediately frame my work within that sort of context. And also Russian constructivist propaganda, incredibly powerful visually, and I knew that most Americans had been conditioned to fear it because of McCarthyism, the Cold War. But an aesthetic in and of itself is not harmful. It's if it's actually tied to a dangerous ideology that marriage becomes harmful. So I wanted people to question that, you can once again, that you can have aesthetics that appear sinister but are actually tied to something benevolent, and then you can have aesthetics that appear benevolent that are actually tied to something sinister. So messing with people. I liked messing with people a little bit. I liked prompting people to ask questions. So, this was an aesthetic that I thought was really strong visually. It appealed to me, and I knew that it would antagonize to a degree.
So I feel like you've got this image, this brand going. You've got the repetition, whether it's stickers, street distribution. You end up with your own printing company, so you're doing that. I guess once again you found a way to get paid to give you access to all the equipment, right?
Yeah, well, I knew when I graduated from RISD that I would not have access to their screen printing facilities, and they already were yelling at me for being in there printing stickers and printing posters that they knew I was going to go out and put up on the street that weren't just, going to be deckle edge art prints. And now I'm on the RISD board because I'm a model of how to bridge these worlds. But back then I was being literally chased out of the printmaking building. They had a picture of me that was like, do not let this guy in the printmaking building. But they had little blocks on the outside of the building that I would climb up like a mountain climber to get to the balcony on the second. They had little small balconies on the second floor. And so that was my way of getting in. Occasionally there'd be a monitor that was like cool enough to ignore that I was banned. But I started a screen printing studio in a warehouse district of town that had a lot of crime, but it was cheap space. And I was doing contract printing. I was printing my own T-shirts and selling them to skate shops and boutiques. And then I was printing my stuff for the street. And I was always printing some posters on thicker paper that were potentially to sell, but no one was buying them. And I was printing stuff to put on the streets. And I was, squeaking by, but I was slowly getting into more debt every year. So I eventually had to close that business because I was in debt. So like failing upward, like you said, I was getting paid, but meagerly. But I had my own. I think it was William Randolph Hearst that said, freedom of the press is guaranteed to those who own one, and he had serious printing presses. But I always liked that, even if he was seen as kind of a monopolist. I looked at it from more of a DIY perspective. Hey, if you own your own printing press, you can publish what you want to publish and put it out into the world. And I thought that was incredibly empowering. So while I was failing with my business, I was planting the seeds of my work. And then when I had to pack that up, I moved to San Diego to work in the skateboard industry, but with a friend who was willing to let me still produce my own stuff under the umbrella of his company.
So 25 years later, I think you've recovered from the failed business, but you figured out how to use your technique, you figured out these skills, but 25 years, public art, commercial design, activist campaigns, gallery exhibitions, some of the most iconic imagery in poetry in decades. I want you to talk a little bit about how you kind of took these skills you had and really just the last 25 years, like a roller coaster of movements, history, progress, retreat. You've always been at the forefront of using this voice to communicate a message. So talk a little bit about kind of that early evolution of that and how you've seen that kind of grow and change over the years. I mean, you've been through waves of the craziness we've all been through, but somehow you've been out there talking to us and interacting with that audience.
Well,
was that a question?
It was, okay. Yeah. I always wanted to be able to put out into the world what I believed in, the art I wanted to make, and to me, they can't be untangled. That my social point of view and my art and my aesthetics. And the beautiful thing about art is that I can get lost in visual problem solving and just dealing with aesthetics, but having a goal in mind of what I want to convey, but that's very escapist. Time just disappears. And then when I'm finished with it, after maybe a lot of trial and error, failure, and then course correction, then I have something that I can share, and that allows me to engage. So it's got this duality of escape, therapeutic escape, and then this tense engagement where people are always going to kind of argue about the ideas, but that is something that I want to happen, even though it isn't always pleasant. But all the different mechanisms that I could devise to make that happen, my clothing line allowing me to put my work on T-shirts, making inexpensive prints that I could sell signed and numbered that would finance stuff I would do on the street, working with activist organizations. For me, it's always been the inside-outside strategy. Like a punk rock self-publisher, an indie record label that knows that Universal Music's not going to put the album out, press it up yourself and distribute it yourself. I always had that mentality. But then later, as opportunities started to happen for things like brand collaborations or doing public works or even sometimes government. I'm like being arrested by one branch of the government and then asking to help with a public awareness campaign by another branch of the government. It's not a monolith. And so how to navigate the inside-outside strategy and change the culture of the system that we all have to contend with for the better if the opportunity to infiltrate on my own terms arises. I think why people are very skeptical about people working within the system, man, is that it tends to compromise what you do. People, they get comfortable and they compromise. I'm diplomatic, but I'm always trying to find the way to convey what my ideals are in any context, and that's sort of part of, along with the visual problem solving, that's another component of problem solving that goes into my work.
So a lot of artists in the room at the ranch. Andrea mentioned our kind of goal is to foster those idea of transformational changes in people's practices in their lives. Can you think of maybe 2 projects along the way that were moments that shifted for you? Like you'll learn something and it puts you in a new direction. What were some of those works that we're seeing flash on the screen that you're like, that one changed my direction?
Well, we said we weren't going to talk about the Obama, so...
Can we give him a waiver on that one? Yeah. All right, you get a waiver on that one.
So, I mean, we've already touched upon this a bit, but the Obey campaign, the way that I had... I sent, before the internet, I sent stickers out free with, when people had to pay for them, they were like a nickel each, with a manifesto, with my, and also with a Xeroxed sticker grid, a proof sheet that you could just take to Kinko's and run your own stickers off. It was like a, punk rock chain letter. That kind of, methodology that then turned into all the different ways that the Obey campaign was being disseminated. Once I had a website, free downloads of things. It was very accessible. There was just, for many years, it was just Shepard@obeygiant.com. You could email. My email was right there on the site. Then it started to get too overwhelming to contend with it all. But that opened my eyes to how much people are craving something that maybe initially starts off as a way to interact with the thing I've done that they see as a cool disruptive campaign, but then once they start to realize how easy it is to apply some of these techniques, then they use it for something meaningful to them. So I loved that. So this was a gradual thing. As far as big mind-blowing things, when I made the Obama poster and had that as a free download, and social media, Facebook was new, but that stuff was just really getting rolling, that it was easier and easier to share things. The way that went viral, that blew my mind, and it made me think about how politics, though it is often seen as controlled by a few power players, there is, there is the possibility of making a difference if you're, if you're just a citizen that cares. And I think, everybody, democracy works a lot better when people participate by voting, of course, but there are many other ways that you can participate in democracy meaningfully. But that, the power of making something that crystallizes an idea in an easily transmittable, shareable way, that was extremely important. And I think that then I was able to build on that with the next project of that nature, build on some of the things I'd learned from the Obama, which was the We the People series that I did for the first Women's March, and was a collaboration with Amplifier and several of the photographers that work with Amplifier. Amplifier is a really great grassroots art organization. They basically are, trying to achieve social transformation through art, and they have a group of artists that they often work with, but there's also a lot of crowdsourcing. People submit things and they get stipends, and so it's created this art ecosystem that's really beautiful. So that side of it, of not just being someone that makes something and then puts it up on my website, but actually tries to work with a larger coalition to not only come up with the ideas, but then disseminate.
I kind of have two questions coming out of that, both around kind of collaboration. So one, I'm curious, within your creative process in your studio, what does collaboration look like for you? But so much of your work is also driving around this, confronting issues around power and propaganda, climate change, injustice. How does collaboration work in your studio? And then how does collaboration work, and how do you see collaboration in your role in some of this social change?
Well, I collaborate with photographers a lot. Great photographer Lynn Goldsmith is here.
Hey, Lynn.
In the crowd. I also collaborate with some, I have studio assistants who, they're working to fulfill my vision, but it's collaborative. I work with, I create all the illustrations for my own work, but I have some production assistants for like graphic elements. I have a design assistant that works with me, so that's collaborative. And I collaborate with musicians when they're asking for a specific concept for an album package. If there's somebody I respect, then I want to take their feedback into account. And then sometimes I collaborate with other artists. I done lots of things with different artists. I'm doing a collaborative show with the artist Space Invader and the artist Damien Hirst in London in October. So I've been working on a lot of collaborative works there. And what I love about collaboration is it's always going to be something that takes you out of only using your typical formulas. It pushes you to evolve. It pushes you to adapt. And this is always going to benefit your work in the long run, even if it has its challenges in the moment. I also think that, when we look at some of the most influential art forms, television and film, those always require a huge amount of collaboration, and yet look at the end result and how, how it affects every one of our senses, and the visceral side of the storytelling. It's hard for a screen print to compete with that. So I'm always thinking about how collaboration can achieve some bigger aim, and not to think small on this stuff, But it takes on so many different forms, collaboration for me, that I can't run through all of them now. But it's extremely important, and I find artists that are really secretive about their process, and they want everything to be like, oh, Zorro in the night came in and like did this canvas, and he's a magician or she's a magician, and everything. Everyone has things that have helped them get to where they are. So there's a lot that I'm concerned about with AI. I know this seems like a tangent, but it has to do with my idea of collaboration and how we're all absorbing a lot of things. People go like, AI, it just takes the whole internet and steals it. It's like, yeah, so does your brain. Yeah. Your brain absorbs everything, you're influenced by everything, and then maybe that's filtered through your sensibility in a way that ultimately is recognizably your own, but don't act like you invented all of that. You were inspired, and being honest about it, to me, is just the natural thing to do, and to give credit to a lot of my team who help me do all the projects I do. I have 3 people that'll be helping me with my mural over the next 3-4 days, because it's a big mural, and it's it's a lot of labor, and if I could do it all by myself, but I did the illustration for the mural, I did the design. But to do this part, there's always an internet comment like, that guy cheats, he uses a team. I'm like, yeah, the architect of that bridge everyone drives across, he just built that whole thing. But there's a weird thing with art where people want to, it's like, if you found out Superman had a jetpack under the cape, like, fucking cheater, Iron Man can do it. Superman, no. But anyway, I hate superhero movies, but I don't even know why I brought up that analogy.
That's good. It's collaboration.
Yeah.
They're cheating.
It was just like, yeah, like you said. But anyway,
it's a great way to look at AI. And think about those things.
But yeah, I mean, AI, I think is it's got its problematic things, but I think it also is it's a tool. The computer is a tool. I'm not using AI other than to like sometimes add an element to a reference I'm working from that isn't there in the original. It speeds up the process, because I sometimes take my own photographs. I sometimes collaborate with photographers. I sometimes license images from photo licensing sites, or I find things that are in the public domain. But they all end up, no matter what the source is, they all end up looking like my work. And even when AI is a portion of how to render a reference image, it still looks like my art. But I'm not going like, prompt, do art piece in style of Shepard Fairey of woman with megaphone. Like, okay, cool, I'm done. Yeah. It doesn't work like that.
Well, in the spirit, maybe we'll crowdsource the rest of our conversation here. The team has some microphones out there. If you raise your hands, just going to ask you, raise your hands so they can bring you a microphone. Please just stand up, and stand up so we can see you, and maybe say your name before you ask your question. But like to remind people, questions start with, my question is. Please stand up so we can see them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marty Hickerson, and I'm really interested in the floral motifs that you use in almost all your work, and where that may have been originated from.
Sure. So in a lot of my more recent work, and when I say more recent, I say the last, probably the last 15 years, I think the floral motifs started with a lot of my pro-peace work, because in the 60s, the protesters would put the flowers in the gun barrels of the National Guard, the Vietnam War protesters. And I thought it was a really powerful symbol. And so I think it began there with some of my anti-Iraq war stuff in, close to 20 years ago now. But then I started to realize that I love flowers. I know it's like a Hallmark cliche, but I love flowers. When I see them in the wild, when I see them on someone's table, when I see art of them. And what I think I realized is that in my sort of, animal nature is an understanding that a flower suggests spring and renewal, growth, health. There are all these things that just intuitively make me feel good when I see a flower. So I've used flowers as symbols of all those things I just mentioned in a lot of my work, and I've also used images that are a threat to the flower as part of a narrative about, what do we want the world to be? What, in these different paths we can take. What are the positive outcomes? What are the negative outcomes? What cultivates the flowers? What cultivates justice? And what kills the flowers? What undermines justice?
How about another question over here?
Thank you. So when I was at RISD, it was quite a bit later, the printmaking program, they talked a lot about printmaking being a democratic medium. So they kind of shifted focus about sort of disseminating ideas and looking at your work. I did a lot of that when I was at RISD, which was really exciting. But my question is, it was so exciting, the Hope poster, the Obama poster, and what you described about how it really touched people, and it did make such a huge impact. I think there was a way that it became the equivalent of a household name, like that poster with the red, white, and blue. I think a lot about what you just said about Barbara Kruger and the constructivist posters and how effective they were. I think that poster did what you were talking about. But you touched on this a little bit with the AI, but I'm wondering the difference between being on the street and putting up stickers and putting up posters, and the difference between the incredibly successful digital age and the way that you created a downloadable poster. I would love for you to talk about the difference of the sensation for you as an artist between those two acts, and then if anything actually has been lost in the digital age. Is there something that has maybe been lost for artists who are interested in making a change on the streets?
I think there's pros and cons to both, but I think we have had a blind spot about some of the downsides of the digital detachment from meaningful human interaction. And when I was putting up a ton of stickers and posters and stencils in the street, people would stop me and ask me questions, and sometimes the cops would stop me and arrest me. So it was always very exciting. And I realized that a lot of people were intrigued by the work because it was affecting the environment they lived in. It was affecting their daily life experience, and especially in places like New York and Boston and LA, where people were out on foot or stopped at traffic lights looking at the electrical box on the corner or the boarded up building. And I realized that there's a much more impactful, visceral side to having your own life experience affected that way, and imagining like someone was committed enough to go out and do this. They took a risk. They used their muscles to do this. The internet allows you to transmit things easily. It's very democratic, but it's also a lot more shallow and superficial in so many different ways. And the glut of imagery means that to make something special, that that stands out from the noise is more difficult, and I'm up for that challenge. But it also means that sort of when also the immediacy, what's happening in the moment is part of the social currency of things in the digital realm. It means that a lot of times people miss something because it's not the trending topic of the moment, or because they're just numb because they've been inundated with so much. So I love to paint murals. Doing work on the street is still very important to me. Making physical art is very important to me because it's a different experience that's deeper, richer, more meaningful.
Hi, my name's Erin. I'm the sole intern, and my question to you is, as someone who came from a skateboard and punk background, how do you view the institutional embrace of your work, with museums, collectors, in comparison to your DIY roots? Is it attention that you're like fussing with, or is it something that you're embracing?
Like I was talking about earlier with my concept of the inside-outside strategy, I had a life-changing experience going to the Whitney and seeing Chuck Close as a 10-year-old on my first trip to New York, and it made me want to draw well. And so I credit an institution and an artist that was institutionally embraced for making a big difference in my life. I don't want that to be all that people have access to if they want to experience art, and I don't want it to be the only way that people interface with my art, especially. Now, it's an amazing opportunity to get to do a museum show or a gallery show where I get to control the presentation. People come in, it's well lit, they get to spend as much time as they want. But that is only a portion of my practice and what's important to me. What's also very important to me is all the DIY empowerment stuff that I still do, that's still what I'm trying to show for a lot of people is a through line from work that they might see in a museum all the way back to the 3-inch square sticker I made in 1989 with a $4.25 an hour skate shop job. I want people to be able to understand how it all evolved, unfolded. But philosophically, I'm much more of a bottom-up person. I want to see a more level playing field. I want to see more fairness, more opportunity. But at the same time, people who are philanthropic and do things for the art world that allow really great institutional shows to happen, go 1%er. You're awesome. Keep doing it. I'm all for that. It all comes down to philosophy. I want people who. There are people who have had incredible success, and I want them to understand how fortunate they are, and I want the people that haven't had success to have opportunity. So, these are all things that are addressed in my art, whether it's on the street or whether it's in the institution, and I do not pander to the elite art world and sacrifice my commitment to the other parts. I do both. So I think it's possible to do both. Like some people have said, like, oh, you're a street artist. How could you show in a museum? That's just the declawed, neutered version. And I'm like, So do you ask musicians that play in live venues why you put your record on an album or a CD? Because, that's not the same visceral. No one's sweat was flying on you and you weren't getting knocked around in the crowd. That's the neutered experience. It's like, come on, we know it's absurd, right? You can have both.
Judy?
I see you're wearing a Harvard t-shirt. I'm wondering if you're thinking about weighing in artistically on some of the issues of our day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm wearing this shirt in support of Harvard. I could have taken classes at Brown through RISD, which, that's basically like going to Harvard. I pretty much went to Harvard going to RISD, right? In George Santos's world, definitely. But I thought about it, and it's on my resume. But I'm very proud of Harvard for standing up for their belief in programs that benefit diversity, equity, and inclusion, because to me those should be unassailable terms and aspirations. Good for them that from stated goals in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, various amendments and laws that have helped our society progress to one that is definitely not equal, but has had equality as a goal, that Harvard is just like, okay, yeah, we're sticking with that idea, even if they're going to be punished. I admire them.
We'll take one last question in the back here.
Hi, Andy Frank. I noticed on your Obama poster, the blue was on the right, the red was on the left, and in your magazine it was just opposite. My question is, am I just hallucinating meaning?
Well, it was on his left. No, it's just what worked with the lighting of the image. Interestingly, in my world, progress is a little more to the left, we read left to right, so when a figure is looking to the right, it feels more like progress. I think it was something that it conveyed what I wanted, regardless of maybe how you might color code it.
Shepard, I'm going to ask one last question. I really appreciate you coming today. I guess my last one is, you're so engaged with the art world, so engaged with social justice, social issues. What are you following right now? Artists, a collective, a podcast? What's in your head that's going to evolve into the next thing we're going to see?
Well, I've been moved by collectives like For Freedoms, that was started by Hank Willis Thomas, but includes a lot of other artists. I participated in it. Like I mentioned before, Amplifier. There's a lot of different orgs I do work with. Greenpeace, Jane Fonda's Climate Pack. There's the Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative. But I have to say, I was a news junkie, and I still read a lot of news. But I have to, after this last election, I basically had to get into a healthier rhythm of dealing with the day-to-day horribleness, because it's soul-sucking. It makes me feel defeated, and I don't want to feel defeated. So I'm always working with people who I believe in, who are like-minded. I'm always motivated. I've channeled my anger at injustice into trying to make very positive things that hopefully present ideas that are somewhat universal, that reframe what we should all be able to agree on, rather than focusing on things that divide us. That's my goal. There's always going to be somebody that's been programmed to think that sustainable energy is a communist plot or whatever. But I'm doing my best.
I'd say, Shepard, amazing artist, amazing human being, and the word hope. The word hope is what we think of when we see you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone.